Welcome to the governing board meeting for the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. Today, April 22nd, which is Earth Day. So a good time for us to be meeting. We will begin with the roll call, please.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chair Pine, Authority Board. I'll be calling the roll. If you can all please unmute yourself. Supervisor Joya.
Here.
Supervisor Peskin.
Present.
Director Holman.
Here.
Supervisor Gorin. Councilmember Hahn.
Here.
Councilmember Lieber.
Here.
Chair Pine.
Present.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you, Ian. So as we do at the start of each meeting, we have an opportunity for public comments, for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda. Of course, you can comment on agenda items later in the meeting. So let's just check to see if we have any public comment, Ann.
We do not have any public comment at this time.
Okay, we'll move then to board member announcements. Any announcements that colleagues would like to share at this time? All right, seeing none, in terms of my chair's report, I just wanted to report that I had the opportunity to attend the groundbreaking for the South Bay Shoreline Project, along with our Executive Director, Amy Hutzel. It was a great event. Wade Crawford from the Natural Resources Department joined, as well as Antoinette Grant, who's the commander of the Army Corps for the Pacific Division. So as you will recall, this is really one of our most significant projects where the authority has authorized $61 million from Measure AA funds. It will provide 2,900 acres of wetland restoration and 4 miles of levees, and provide substantial protection to really important infrastructure and communities and ecosystems in the South Bay. So it was really, really a great event. That's all I have to add today. So I turn it over to you, Amy, for your executive.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and the Shoreline event was terrific, and Chairman Pine spoke on behalf of the authority, and there was quite a bit of press coverage. So that I can send around the articles. They didn't, heavily feature the Restoration Authority, but they're still great articles about flood protection, climate change, and wetland restoration in the Bay. So for the executive officer report, I just wanted to first mention some updates on federal and state funding for San Francisco Bay. So EPA San Francisco Bay Water Quality Improvement Fund has done really well this year. It received $25 million through the Infrastructure Act, and then another $24 million in the FY22 appropriations and the omnibus. So this year, they're going to put out a request for applications for $29 million, which is several times their typical annual amount of $5 to $6 million. And that's the 24 million FY22 appropriations and 5 million of the Infrastructure Act funding. And then there'll be the other 20 million of the Infrastructure Act funding will follow 5 million annually. And we're working hard to advocate for additional appropriations each year for EPA. So we're asking for 50 million in the FY23 appropriations. That might not happen, but it would be nice to get, another 25 million. And then the Coastal Conservancy, the state budget process continues to move along, and there's 350 million in the governor's budget for the Coastal Conservancy for coastal resilience. That's not just in San Francisco Bay, that's along the whole coast in San Francisco Bay. But I think San Francisco Bay is really well set up with, you know, a pipeline of projects to support with that coastal resilience funding. And then I also wanted to mention the tribal engagement policy. Authority staff have been reviewing information from the listening sessions held by other agencies like the Conservancy, BCDC, others about tribal engagement, and have started developing the policy. We're going to consult with the advisory committee members and with tribal representatives and bring a draft for the board's consideration in October of this year. So we'll have a formal tribal engagement policy. Those are just the somewhat random updates. Now on the agenda items. Item 6A is a continuation of remote meetings due to the state of emergency. And this is a little complicated, to be honest, and hopefully that memo made sense. But what we would recommend is that the board make a finding to continue remote meetings for the next 30 days. That would enable the advisory committee and the oversight committee to hold remote meetings in May. They each have a May meeting scheduled. We could then cancel the May 26th board meeting, the special board meeting we had scheduled, and stop making these findings for now, at least, and move to in-person / hybrid meetings, starting with the June authority board meeting. So we would hold the June authority board meeting at Beale Street, the Metro Center. We'd need at least one board member to be there. And I think Chair Pine has volunteered to be at least the one board member. The remaining board members, you would have to be in locations that are publicly accessible. And we'd have to notice them, but you could, meet closer to home and not have to get into the city. So that is what we're recommending. To do that, item 6A, we recommend supporting resolution 94, which keeps the remote meetings going for the next month. And then item 6B, we need a vote on cancellation of the May 26th board meeting. So with that explanation, I'd open it up to your thoughts on the future of our meetings, at least for the next couple months.
Susan Gorin, you had a comment.
Good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the sensitivity and the challenges of moving through this. Regional agencies are trying to navigate this. I just was at the CSAC Legislative Conference yesterday and Wednesday, and I talked with someone who talked about the fact that Assembly Member Cecilia Aguirre Curry is working through one of the bills that is contemplating what this means for the future of work and state agencies, regional agencies. And she, like so many others, are really concerned because we have many members of our community who are disruptive, let's just say that, for lots of different reasons. And so she's trying to make it as easy as possible for elected officials and appointed officials to meet remotely if need be, while trying to understand the dynamics of the political challenges we have currently with the anti-vaxxers and a lot of different groups. Now, for San Francisco, this is part of your daily routine. I get that, but for many other bodies, it is challenging to navigate. This body, we don't have that as an issue, but it's one of the issues that they're trying to move through in thinking about state legislation. So I thought I would just mention that.
Thank you, Director Gorin. Are you comfortable with the recommendation that we go to a hybrid meeting in June?
Absolutely. You and I participate in BCDC, and I had I participated in BCDC from my office, and I think that was fine. And so this is great. It's a good accommodation. And I would move the resolution, but I think we have public comment first.
Why don't you take a moment for public comment? Let's check on that, Ann.
There is no public comment.
Any other thoughts or questions about the proposal? It would mean again that we would have our first hybrid meeting at the June meeting. We have a motion. I'll go ahead and second that motion. So we can have the roll call vote, please, Ann.
Sure. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Han,
Yes.
Councilmember Lieber,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Aye.
Chair Pine.
Yes.
This motion passes. Agenda item number 6A is approved.
It looks like we need to take action on canceling the May 26th board meeting. I'm sorry I didn't collapse that in together with the prior motion. But I'll go ahead and move that we not hold a special meeting on May 26th. If I could have a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Motion and a second. Check
All
again.
right.
Comments or from members or from the public?
No.
Then we can go ahead and take that vote.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Gorin, Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Han,
Aye.
Councilmember Lieber,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Aye. Yes, there's way too many G names in this call. You ought to be really glad you don't have a Supervisor Gore and Gorin.
Chair Pine.
Yes.
This motion passes.
That would be
Agenda
great.
Item 6B is approved.
Thank you. So Amy, you're going to walk us through item 6C as well?
Yeah, so 6C is in response to request at the last board meeting to look at the legislation currently regarding Brown Act meetings. So there seems to be two bills currently, AB 1944 and AB 2449. And there's a memo from me, and I would thank Josh Pirtle for doing most of the work on this, and then a resolution and a letter of support related to AB 1944. And the letter focuses on the support for allowing board members to meet via teleconference without posting their locations on the agenda or making their locations accessible. So board members, you could opt into this for a given board meeting. Board members could join remotely. If you do that, you also have to allow for the public to join in remotely via video teleconference or teleconference. And then we also added a paragraph at the end just touching on flexibility for board tours, which the legislation wouldn't impact that as it's written. We'd be able to do board tours, but we just added that in case the legislation evolves. And then we touched on, the environmental benefits of remote meetings and just the fact that the authority is a regional agency. So our recommendation is to pass resolution 95, and we can send the letter to the bill authors Assembly Members Lee and Christina Garcia on this bill.
Okay, thank you for the summary, Amy. Any questions or comments from board members? It seems like definitely the better of the two bills that you summarized. And we'll check with the public for any public comments.
There is no public comment, sir.
Okay. Unless there's further discussion, we could take a motion on this item. Moved by Director Peskin,
Second.
seconded by Director Joya. You would please take the roll call vote, Ann.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Han,
Yes.
Councilmember Lieber,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Aye.
Chair Pine.
Yes,
This motion passes. Agenda items 6C is approved.
thank you, Ann. So turn back to you, Amy, for the 660 and 6E.
Yeah, so item 6D is the regular report on expenditures under the EO's delegated authority. So they are laid out in the memo. There was a filing fee for CEQA, a contract for design of our annual report, which Taylor will touch on next, sponsorship of Estuary News Magazine to feature articles on authority projects, a contract with NBC for Open Road, and a contract with San Francisco Estuary Institute for improvements to the Eco Atlas, which we use heavily for our mapping of our existing and eligible projects. So those are the expenditures. And then I'll turn it over to Taylor to just briefly mention where we're at with the annual report.
Sure. It's almost done. We're still finalizing the design, so it's not ready to share with you today, but when it is finalized, we'll post it on the website, share it with our network, and when it's printed, mail hard copies out to the board.
Great. And that's all for the executive officer's report.
All right, thank you, Amy. And we can then move to item 7, which is an advisory committee's chair report. And Jessica Martini Lamb will provide that.
Good morning, Chair Pine and board members. The advisory committee's most recent meeting was held on March 18th of 2022. The advisory committee approved our revisions to its charter, which reflect the governing board's amendment of the AAC procedural document and now requires the advisory committee to record the votes of all members in our meeting minutes. We also heard a presentation from Restoration Authority staff on an overview of the grant round 5. And the advisory committee considered a staff recommendation to forgo a request for proposals for grant round 6. And I can provide more detail regarding the AC's discussion during public comment on today's agenda item 13. The advisory committee also heard an update from regarding the work of the ad hoc subcommittee on equity. Our next meeting will be held on May 20th, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate that. Appreciate your service on the advisory committee. Any questions for Jessica? Okay, seeing none. Let's move to approval of our minutes. Item 8 is our minutes for February 25th. And item 9 is the minutes for March 28th. Do members have any suggested changes or comments? Then I would move that we approve in one motion the minutes of February 25th and March 28th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And if Ann, you could take the roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Han,
Aye.
Councilmember Lieber,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Aye.
Chair Pine.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda item number 8 and 9 is approved.
Okay, very good. So we'll now move to two recommended grants. The first is Shoreline Park in Burlingame. And I believe Karen McDonald will present on this item.
All right, hopefully everyone can see that. Okay. I'll begin. Good morning, Chair Pine and advisor, members of the authority. My name is Karen McDowell, and I'm presenting this on behalf of Natasha Dunn, who's the project manager. Staff recommends authorizing disbursement up to $991,499 to the Sphere Institute to augment the grant of $500,000 previously authorized by the authority to continue to conduct site studies and community engagement, prepare detailed plans and designs, prepare regulatory permit applications and environmental review documents, and prepare a long-term lease application for the Shoreline Park Burlingame project, which will transform the 9.4 acre vacant parcel of state-owned bayfront land into a public nature and recreation park, and will include restoration of approximately 3 to 3.5 acres of tidal marsh and transition zone habitats along the shoreline of San Mateo County. The authority awarded partial funding in the amount of $500,000 to Sphere at its June 2021 board meeting, and this recommendation would augment funding for previously authorized tasks. Right. As a reminder, oops, sorry. Wrong mouse. As a reminder, the site and surrounding land were created in 1960 by the illegal placement of approximately 150 acres of fill in San Francisco Bay by the Anza Corporation. Following the lawsuit, this land was divided between the Anza Corporation and the California State Lands Commission. This parcel is owned by the State Lands Commission and was never developed. In 2017, the state received proposals from developers to turn the parcel into a hotel. Sphere and the San Mateo Resource Conservation District proposed a partnership to develop a public nature-based park instead. These photos show the current state of the parcel. The site is currently fenced off and the Bay Trail is in disrepair, and it provides relatively poor habitat for the wildlife due to the dominance of weedy ruderal habitat and absence of native trees and shrubs. Fennel, Italian thistle, and various non-native grasses dominate the majority of the site. The project will restore approximately 3 to 3.5 acres of tidal marsh and transition zone habitats, and one of the few remaining suitable locations along the city of Burlingame shoreline, which is heavily developed. It will also create much needed access to nature and park amenities for the public. Initial community engagement has begun with input from diverse stakeholders, including regulatory agencies, kayak and kite surfing clubs, private companies, and local community groups and citizens. The tidal marsh ecosystem will be designed to maximize the tidal habitat function and wildlife value, be resilient to sea level rise, and provide recreational and educational opportunities. The transition zone will provide high tide refugia for tidal marsh species during extreme high tide events and space for landward transgression of tidal marsh habitat as sea levels rise, and will support plant and animal community diversity, including pollinators. The most significant change in site will involve the bird community, which will increase in diversity and abundance, and with an increase in vegetation and diversity of microhabitats. This project is a public-private partnership between Sphere and the San Mateo County Resource Conservation District, and involves close collaboration with the City of Burlingame, the State Lands Commission, and the Bay Restoration Regulatory Integration Team, and others. Project benefits include restoring tidal marsh and marsh upland transition zone habitats, demonstrating an innovative nature-based approach to sea level rise resilience, advancing educational opportunities for the community, including an education center, and providing an improved section of the Bay Trail and Water Trail with site amenities for recreation. Thank you for your attention, and please let me know if you have any questions. I have Will Johnson and Greg Borough here from Sphere to answer any project-specific questions.
I thank you, Karen, for that overview. As a resident of Burlingame, I'm very familiar with this area. It really has been neglected, and it's really exciting to see this proposal. You know, the public access will be particularly significant, and show people the potential for restoration, or how restoration can provide multiple benefits, will really be terrific at this site. Dr. Gorin, your hand is raised.
Well, I'm very jealous, Dave. This is a fabulous project, and boy, I hope to have a tour, or the next time I fly out of SFO, I'm gonna make sure that I have some time to take a walk through there, because I do walk along the trail when I stay at one of those hotels. Congratulations, it looks like a marvelous project.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely take you on the tour. Airplanes too.
10 minutes from the airport.
Dr. Hahn.
I'll just say briefly that this is a reminder, there are, so few parcels left, and the threats that they come under, and just the challenges of having so many jurisdictions owning bayfront property, and not necessarily having a conservation mindset around that property. It's just a big challenge, I think, for us. But when you have money in hand, which is what's so incredible about the Bay Restoration Authority and the other efforts that are finally gaining a lot of steam, it's easier to make headway. So, but it is terrifying to think that this is the last piece of undeveloped shorefront property in Burlingame. And I know it's the same in many communities. And I don't know if there's a conversation there for us about actually working with jurisdictions to rezone, and to educate them about the importance of not continuing with old bad practices around our shoreline. I don't know if people have, I'm late to the conversation, so maybe these discussions have been had previously.
I think, we've really haven't gone into the zoning area, since of course that's such locally driven, but it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I would also chime in. I think the Bay Adapt effort with BCDC is, I wouldn't, I don't know that they are trying to influence local zoning, but definitely regional agencies interested in protection of the Bay, working with local cities and counties to plan ahead for sea level rise and do it in a way that's, nature-based. And obviously, land use decisions are a key part of that.
I'll just say that I think the state legislature has asserted itself a lot more in the last 10 years around land use and stepped in on behalf of housing. And it seems to me that if the courts are in fact granting them and supporting them in taking what used to be considered exclusively local authority away on behalf of housing, that perhaps we could pursue the possibility of getting state level action around sea level rise. Maybe some of the folks who spent time in Sacramento or who helped bring this particular effort forward there have some thoughts about that.
Dr. Gorin?
Thanks, Sophie. It's a provocative conversation, and certainly around for BCDC, we have been involved in sort of tepidly approaching those conversations. Always around climate change, we said there is a role for BCDC to connect more concretely with counties and cities as they move forward in updating their general plans. And so maybe it could be a recommendation from this board, an advisory letter to all of the counties and jurisdictions around the Bay, suggesting exactly that, looking for opportunities to rezone as a resource conservation area in anticipation of bay level rise, because let's not wait for the last remaining parcels to approach development and redevelopment, as this parcel of land could have been a hotel. So it's a good suggestion. Maybe we can be a little bit more activist in approaching this.
Dr. Weaver?
If that's I'm sorry, I was gonna say, if that's something we can agendize maybe for a future time to have a conversation, I personally, or a letter, I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. And as Ms. Hudsell mentioned too, joining Bay Adapt is a good interim step for various jurisdictions. And I think we can all be reaching out to our local folks to really urge them in that direction. And it's something that they can do quickly, and sort of get on our team in that way. But I think that we could be sending a letter to local jurisdictions, and maybe in concert with BCDC, to really amplify the issue of what will be happening under sea level rise. To this project, my compliments really go out to Sphere and everyone who has worked on this. I have ridden my bicycle through here, and it really is kind of not an optimum experience. And there are various places where you can put in your stand-up paddle board, and when you paddle past this location, it's really a letdown from the rest of the area. So I think that this is going to be a great project and much needed. You know, connecting the rest of the Bay Trail is such an important objective for everybody who's in one of the agencies who touches this. And I think we're going to have some more opportunities to talk about preventing unfortunate uses of Bayside properties coming up later on the agenda as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver. Dr. Holman?
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation, and also support sending letters to jurisdictions who have control, if you will, over lands that are at the Bay. But there are positives to that are probably obvious. I think one of the positives that may not be obvious is oftentimes when organizations advocate for protections of sensitive lands, it's when there's an item or an issue or a proposal that comes before that jurisdiction. And sometimes the letters can get lost as a part of a large project. So I think if we could be proactive in sending out some communication that's educational and somewhat advocating too, but certainly on the educational realm, that would be really, really helpful. I think some communities, no news to any of you here, some communities are sensitive to state overreach. So we want to be careful about that. But I think education, advocacy from our perspective, and opportunities and consequences, I think something of that nature to various jurisdictions would be really helpful. And again, if we can do it separate from a project proposal, while these kind of communications get lost, I think it would be great. Perhaps even, it just occurs to me, perhaps even so with my open space district role, the various wards, the elected directors who have various cities in their wards, make presentations at least once a year to those jurisdictions about what's going on and this and that. I don't know. I'm just going to throw it out there. Perhaps that this group of persons might be interested in making presentation to the various entities that have jurisdiction over Bay lands. Just a thought on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. So it sounds like, Amy, perhaps we should agendize a further discussion about this, and I think we'd want to hone in on, what we'd want to be saying in this sort of outreach.
Yeah, I think we could agendize and get some, other speakers to come in and join us to talk about, land use decisions along the San Francisco Bay shoreline. And I like the idea of, then doing a letter, perhaps in conjunction with BCDC, an educational letter. I think most, you'd have to have your head in the sand to not realize sea level rise is coming, but I think it can be very challenging for local electeds to be making, very challenging decisions about, what's happening on any given piece of property. And certainly in our experience, developing projects, it's a real mix around San Francisco Bay in terms of partnership on restoration and nature-based flood management. I think it's part of that is capacity at different local agencies, and part of it is, probably priorities.
Okay, well, we'll definitely agendize that. I think another benefit of reaching out to electeds in Bayside communities is just, inform them more of the work of the Restoration Authority. Like this sphere project really probably would not go forward but for the contributions of the Restoration Authority. And I would guess that many electeds aren't really up to date on the opportunities the Restoration Authority provides. Director Hahn?
I just wanted to say that we did have the Restoration Authority come and present to the Berkeley City Council. And thank you again to the staff who participated in that. It was very well received. And most of my colleagues did not know anything about the authority. And I think once probably isn't enough. We may, to the extent that we really need the partnership of these communities, I think having a regular program of maybe yearly presentations that maybe emphasize different aspects of our work. Certainly the introductory presentation that we received, I think was a great first, but a second could be the importance of zoning and of not continuing to develop these types of parcels in the ways that they were developed in the last 100 years, could be a second in a series. And I think we should be systematic. And I know that takes resources, and that overhead and administrative resources for the authority is a big challenge. So we might have to think creatively about how to do that, but I just welcome the conversation. And I think, I'm pretty sure, I think the next item that we're going to be, or I forget if it's the next or the one after, but, was going to be a 230 luxury homes. So it's certainly not unique to Burlingame. And I feel like it's something, it also drives our costs up when we have to, and it makes it harder for local authorities to make different decisions when the economic value of these parcels is so high and you're essentially bidding against for-profit developers just to keep sea level rise from engulfing the entire, parts of the entire Bay Area. So I welcome a further conversation about this. We've probably gone more than far enough without it being agendized item. Thank you. I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to shout out that we did get a great presentation in the
Okay.
city of Berkeley.
All right, good to hear. Well, let's turn back to the project, the Shoreline Park project. And take a moment to see if there's any public comment.
No, sir, no public comment.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and move approval of the grant to the Shoreline Park. Burlingame Park.
Appropriate, and I'll second.
Very good. Ann, if you could please take the roll call vote.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Aye.
Councilmember Han,
Aye.
Councilmember Lieber,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Aye.
Chair Pine.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda item number 10 is approved.
Okay, very good. We move to item 11, which is another grant proposal for the Tiscornia Marsh Restoration and Sea Level Rise Adaptation Project. And Linda Tong will take us through this one.
Thank you, Chair Pine, and good morning, all members of the board and public. My name is Linda Tong, and I'm presenting the staff recommendation for the Tiscornia Marsh Restoration and Sea Level Rise Adaptation Project. Staff recommends that the authority authorize a grant of up to $3,082,000 to Marin Audubon Society to prepare permit applications, develop final designs, continue engaging community members in the project, and to provide funds towards initial construction for the Tiscornia Marsh Restoration and Sea Level Rise Adaptation Project. This project aims to address extensive loss of tidal marsh at the mouth of the San Rafael Canal in Marin County due to erosion, and to help reduce flood risk for the adjacent canal community. This project would build on and implement the conceptual design work that was funded by the authority in June of 2019. Next, please. Tiscornia Marsh is located on the south bank of the San Rafael Canal, right by the canal community, which is the largest and most diverse disadvantaged community in Marin County. The site consists of a 20-acre remnant tidal marsh and mudflat and 4 acres of diked marsh to the west, adjacent to Pickleweed Park. Within the project area, the levee that's adjacent to the tidal marsh and surrounding the diked marsh has an uneven dirt surface with variable elevation, which increases the vulnerability of the canal community to sea level rise. Next, please. The project would restore tidal marsh habitat and construct horse beach habitat, improve the adjacent levee, and construct ecotone transition zone, and open a diked marsh to tidal action. The planned restoration would expand habitat for the endangered California ridge-raised rail, salt marsh harvest mouse, and other species, and address overtopping and erosion from waves. The coarse beach would protect the outboard tidal marsh from erosion. And the entire levee within the project site would be elevated to a uniform elevation to provide more consistent flood protection. The levee section that's along the San Rafael Canal would be relocated landward to allow for restoring the diked marsh to tidal action. And the bay side of the new levee segments would include a wide transition zone that could provide high tide refugia habitat for endangered species and other wildlife. The upgraded levee in the project area would benefit the community by providing protection from flooding as sea level rises, and by providing public access to the segment of Bay Trail that's going to be constructed along the top of the improved levee. The project would demonstrate nature-based techniques to restore habitat and protect the shoreline and adjacent communities from sea level rise, serving as a model for reusing dredged sediments to expand marshes in the bay. Next, please. The portion of the project that's proposed for funding consists of these main components: regulatory permitting, which includes coordinating with regulatory agencies through the Bay Restoration Regulatory Integration Team, or BRIT, preparing applications for regulatory and city permits. It also would include final design, performing analyses to support the final design, as well as identifying sources of dredged material and preparing the complete design for the restoration. This funding would also include community outreach, including additional public meetings and youth media outreach through a community-based partner. This grant would also cover bid and construction management and the first 2 phases of construction. The current phasing of construction includes, for the first phase, constructing the coarse beach that would protect the outboard tidal marsh and installing construction access so the site can accept dredged sediments for the marsh restoration. And for the second phase of construction, that would include constructing a setback levee behind the diked marsh and then raising the levee segment adjacent to the tidal marsh, and placement of imported dredge material for the construction of the eroded marsh. Next, please. Some of the benefits of this project is that Tiscornia Marsh is one of the few remaining marshes along the San Rafael Bayfront. And this project would restore tidal marsh and high tide refugia for wildlife, including 2 endangered species, California ridge rail and salt marsh harvest mouse. And it would fill a major gap in the city of San Rafael's flood protection plans. This project would also would provide a complete marsh habitat, which would include transition habitat, tidal marsh, and intertidal mudflats, leading to increased numbers and diversity of wildlife. And this project could serve as a model for beneficial reuse of dredged sediments to rebuild and enhance marshes in the bay as a sea level rise adaptation strategy. Next, please. Some additional project benefits include engaging youth, adults, and economically disadvantaged communities. Marin Audubon Society plans to continue an ongoing relationship with Multicultural Center of Marin, a local community organization. They're a multiracial environmental coalition that advocates for equitable inclusion of low-income communities in planning and community preparedness, including sea level rise and climate adaptation. And as mentioned before, the project would improve public access by constructing Bay Trail on top of the improved levee. Next, please. In 2016, Marin Audubon Society received funds to explore this project through a grant program hosted by the State Coastal Conservancy and Marin Community Foundation. That grant funded preparation of conceptual designs for restoring Tiscornia Marsh and supported some initial outreach to the canal community. In 2019, Marin Audubon Society received a grant from the Restoration Authority to advance the design and complete environmental impact review. And so this recommended authorization would complete the planning process and provide a portion of the funds needed for the first and second phases of construction. Marin Audubon Society plans to obtain additional funds to fully cover these phases of construction before requesting bids to construct the coarse beach and place dredge material to restore the eroded marsh. And eventually there'll be needed funds for a third and final phase of construction, which would include finalizing the course beach construction, restoring the dike to marsh, and then surfacing the levee crest to create the segment of Bay Trail. This plan for phasing of construction might vary depending on the timing of receiving sediments from entities that are producing dredge material and when additional funds can be obtained. Next, please. Marin Audubon Society is very well suited to carry out this project. They have a long history of advocating for wildlife and implementing multi-benefit marsh restoration projects. And they've hired Environmental Science Associates, ESA, to provide the engineering design, technical reports, and environmental review documents for this project. And ESA will continue as a subcontractor in this project. And the project also has years of community support and involvement. Their community-based partner, Multicultural Center of Marin, has been involving residents over the past 3 years through public meetings, site visits, developing their website, and working with youth. And they're planning to create a new program where they can train community members to broaden the message to a larger community and train them how to educate, engage, and empower residents to participate in projects that do impact them. Next, please. Staff recommends supporting this important restoration project that would benefit wildlife and a community that's really vulnerable to sea level rise. Thank you. And if Barbara Salzman is in the participant list, she may be interested in saying a few words.
Thank you for the overview, Linda. And Barbara would welcome your comments.
Chris and Andrew.
There are no public comments, sorry.
Oh,
It looks like she needs to be promoted to panelist. She's currently in the attendees.
thank you.
Right.
I'm trying to do promoter right now.
Thank you.
Can hear me because I'm muted and I'll expose myself here. Well, I just wanted to first thank you all for your previous grant, and in anticipation of this one, express our extreme appreciation. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. So, and this project is so exciting and challenging and important, we think, for the Bay and for all its resources, as well as the San Rafael community, that we are just thrilled that you're considering us now. We did receive an Ocean Protection Council grant recently, just last month, and so that will help us through the next phase. We've done a lot of marsh restoration that I was just sitting here thinking about over the last 20 years, large and small, but this is really challenging and interesting, and with the need for sediments. And I didn't actually realize when we started this that the restoring marsh in the Bay is such a new phenomena. And we're really pleased to be able to be providing a model for that, for other such projects around the Bay. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but we're excited and anxious to get going with the next phases of our project here. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Barbara. So I'll come back to the my colleagues for questions or comments. I had one question about, you know, where the sediment will be coming from.
Yeah, this is a question maybe you asked last time, but it was asked last time. We've done work on that since through our last grant, and actually there are 6 alternatives. The problem is timing. We have, well, maybe 7 alternatives. We started out with the core dredging, and it appears as though their timing is going to be too soon for our project. We need to get permits yet. Although we have CEQA, we need all the permits from the agencies. And they're planning on going this summer. But there's four marinas in the canal area. One of them doesn't dredge enough material, so there's there's possibility of 3. And the timing would need to be worked out. We've contacted each of them. There are 2 other alternatives. One is the Golden Gate Bridge District, which we've also been in touch with. They're dredging, everybody's dredging this year. They're dredging this year, as are all the marinas. But they dredge every 5 years. We hope not to have to wait that long. And then the city of Petaluma also was an alternative. So it's working out the timing and the details but we have a number of options and we're pretty certain we can work something out. Everybody, all the dredgers are very supportive and they'd like to be involved with our project if we can work out the timing and the other logistics.
Great, thank you. Director Gorin.
Thanks, Barbara, for great work on this project. You and I go way back talking about working together. Boy, and going through all of the alternatives of doing a matchmaking game of available materials with the need, maybe there is a role for, I'm full of good ideas and let somebody else do the work. So Amy, there might be a good idea to create some kind of banking matchmaking process to keep track of the dredging projects around the bay, the schedule of when dredged materials might be available, and the projects that need dredged materials. So that could be an important function that we might be able to move forward on.
Yeah, there actually is, it's called Set a Match. Yeah, it's like a dating site for to restoration projects, and the LTMS, the long-term management strategy for dredge material, runs
and
that.
Who operates Set a Match? Boy, it's such a sexy name.
I know.
BCDC, isn't it?
Does BCDC actually?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Brenda Gaden at BCDC does a lot of the work. I would say it has a couple successes, but it really comes down to people like Barbara Salzman contacting the different ports and marinas that are dredging, contacting the Corps of Engineers, figuring out the schedules for dredging, which are constantly changing based on funding availability and environmental windows and permitting, and working really assiduously with the dredging community. I mean, I know the Corps of Engineers wants to get sediment to this site. It's all about the timing and them not having to pay any additional cost to do it.
Thank you. And just a humorous comment about Barbara. She's been involved in planning efforts for decades. I think she has all of the paper behind her involved in all of those efforts.
I should have tidied up more. It's hard.
Thanks,
so
all.
I don't have time.
Okay, let's see if we have any comments from the public.
No comments from the public, sir.
All right. And coming back to the board. Any further comments? Otherwise, we could take a motion.
This is Susan Gorin. So move.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Gorin, a second by Lieber. The roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Han,
Yes.
Councilmember Leeper,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Aye.
Chair Pine.
Yes,
This motion passes. Agenda item 11 is approved.
thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything, Barbara. Amazing work.
Thank you. And thank you all for your positive vote, right? And staff too, for all your work on this. Linda's been great. So's Amy. Known Amy for a long time.
So let's move to item 12. This is a follow-up from our last meeting where we discussed the Newark Baylands project. This is a proposal to send a letter of support for preserving that property. Amy, are you going to walk us through this one?
Yeah, at the last board meeting, there was really good discussion about the Newark Baylands application by Trust for Public Land. Our staff, primarily Jessica Davenport, followed up with Trust for Public Land. At this point, there is not a willing seller yet. There's no, option agreement. TPL has not, raised other funds for the project yet. So I think we're still a ways off from, any close of escrow on this property. TPL was, estimating it's a couple years off, assuming, the landowner is interested in this option. The value of the property, there needs to be an appraisal. If they're going for, state funding, it would appraisal approved, by Department of General Services. I think I'm not going to guess at the value of the property, but I think it's well beyond what, just one funder like the authority could support. I think it's going to have to be a mix of funding. So at this point, staff is recommending that the board sends a letter to Trust for Public Land indicating support, and that along with that letter, our staff would stay very closely in touch with TPL. And if and when we can bring this back to the board for funding, we would work to do that. So at this, I'm sure you guys want to discuss this, but the staff recommendation is support for resolution 96 to send the letter.
All right, thank you for the review of that item, Amy. So just a question. So right now, there's no indication that the developer is interested in selling the property. Is that correct?
There's not a willing seller letter at this point. Jessica, do you want to?
I can say a couple words about that. TPL invited the staff of the Restoration Authority as well as CDFW, including a representative of Wildlife Conservation Board, to tour the site with one of the landowners who is interested, but it's a partnership. So they have to get all the landowners on board. And there was actually a death amongst the owners that delayed their conversation about this. So they had been hoping to get a willing seller by the end of last year, and they are continuing to have discussions. And so there are signs that there may be a willing seller letter soon, but there is not one.
Okay. Director Holman?
Yes, thank you. And your last comments, Jessica, are really helpful and informative. I'm just quickly, it's like, so we talked earlier about the project of Shoreline Park, and the great enthusiasm we have for 9.4 acres. And if you look at that in comparison and in scale with this project, it's pretty phenomenal. And it's all important, but the scale of this one is just mind-blowing, the opportunity, and frankly, the devastation if it's developed into luxury homes. So I really appreciate your update, Jessica, that gives us some hope that there might be willing sellers coming forward in the shorter term. Not an assurance, but hopeful at least. I'm in support of sending a letter. Sally and I did speak earlier today, and I apologize to the staff here, to Amy, because I just had such a week that I didn't get to this until earlier, but coming up with some alternative language in the letter. I think the letter is important. It gives indication of our support, formal indication of our support. But I also found the letter a little passive in its approach. So I sent some alternative language as just, something to consider. So I don't know, Amy, if you can share that or what the best way is to do this. I've not done this before with this group.
Yeah, let me find the email. I looked at the language, and Josh Pirtle, the attorney, looked at the language, and I think it would be fine. I would say the reason the letter sounds the way it does is that we did not want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of CEQA findings
Sure.
with funding, or just being, pre-decisional in terms of indicating how, the board members would vote on the item if and when it comes to the board. But I think your
And I
language,
appreciate that.
yeah,
Yes.
I think your language is fine. Oh, here it is. Okay, sorry. I'm scrolling and talking at the same time.
Of course.
So what Director Holman proposes is that the first paragraph be revised to read, on behalf of the governing board of the San Francisco Bay Restoration, I am writing to express support for projects that protect existing baylands habitats, such as the Trust for Public Lands proposal, Newark Baylands acquisition, interim management, and restoration planning. The project as described below represents an opportunity of large scale and importance to fulfilling the goal of bay restoration. We further understand the urgency. And then the last.
So if I might, Amy, just for a second. So for those who are reading this for the first time, it's like, so how that changes is those last two sentences are added. So the first long sentence stands as it is. So the new language starts with the project as described below, if that makes it easier for folks. Okay, thank you.
And then the last paragraph would be revised to read, SFBRA understands the urgency of this request. We also recognize the potential of significant and permanent impact to the Newark wetlands, and asks that you provide staff with a willing seller letter and an appraisal as soon as they become available. In addition, we have directed staff to work with you to evaluate any project updates as they develop.
Thank you so much, Amy. And I'm not wedded to this wording, but I just thought at the very least it could provide a starting point for, making our interest a little bit clearer and our support a little bit clearer. I understand you said earlier that they were very happy to hear that we were going to be sending a letter. For those outside of that agency who might see this letter, I think it kind of presents an opportunity for us to indicate our stronger interest to those other persons who might see this as well. So thank you very much. And certainly I'm open to edits. This was just a good starting point. I thought it would be good to provide some kind of draft. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Holman. I think that proposed language works very well. Are there other reactions, or are people comfortable with that amended language? Director Lieber?
I just wanted to comment that I really appreciate Director Holman for stepping in and amplifying in strengthening the language within the overall shell of where we're at right now. And I really appreciate Ms. Hutzel and Mr. Pirtle for stepping in this morning to take a really fast look at that. This is really a project of or an area of prime importance for us.
Thank you, Director Lever. Any other comments, or do we have any comments from the public?
No public comments, sir.
Karen, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, please. Could I make the motion that we send the letter as drafted with the edits provided in the email and presented to the board?
Second.
Very good. We have a motion and a second to send the letter as amended. Once there's further comment, we can proceed with the vote.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Joya,
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin,
Aye.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Councilmember Han,
Aye.
Councilmember Leeper,
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin,
Aye.
Chair Pine.
Yes.
This motion passes. Agenda item 12 is approved with direction of revision.
Okay. And then we turn to item 13, which is to continue our discussion from our last meeting concerning how to approach the grant round 6 and whether to limit that round in some respects. And Jessica Davenport will present on this item.
Thank you, Chair Pine, and good afternoon to you, board members and the public. Today, I am presenting staff's recommendation to pass Resolution 97, directing staff to use an alternative process for grant round 6. Staff recommends foregoing issuing an RFP in 2022 and instead relying on the round 5 list of projects when selecting projects to recommend in the coming fiscal year. In support of this recommendation, I will show how we can continue to stay on track in terms of geographic distribution of funding and address equity concerns. I will also provide information about additional funding sources for bay restoration in the coming year. So the proposed process would be forego issuing the RFP in 2022, ask applicants with unfunded or partially funded applications from Grant Round 5 to submit project updates in the summer of this year. And AC members who reviewed the Round 5 projects would be invited to review the updates and attend a meeting with staff to provide input on which projects to prioritize. Staff would then develop a list of recommended projects for Round 6. Here's some of the advantages of the recommended approach. We would be able to bring projects to the board earlier in the fiscal year, and we would save time for both applicants and reviewers. Applicants can focus their time on seeking funds from other programs if they were not part of Round 5, and staff can focus on additional outreach efforts to improve equity. Here are some questions raised about the recommended approach. Will the authority be able to stay on track to achieve the 20-year targets for distribution of funding by region? Will the equity concerns be adequately addressed? And what does the advisory committee think of this approach? The AC's input is provided in the memo, and AC Chair Jessica Martini Lamb will be providing a summary during the public comment period. So this slide might be a little confusing, so feel free to ask questions. But as far as staying on track, I think you'll remember this slide from a previous presentation where I presented on Round 5 and how we were already on target for the 5 years out of 20, where we'd expect the projects to reach 25% of their 20-year goal. So after 6 years, after round 6, we would expect them to be at 30%. So then I calculated for the ones that aren't yet at 30%, the East Bay and the West Bay, how much money would we need to allocate to them in round 6 to get to the 30%? And you can see those numbers here on the slide. It's not a huge amount. So then we'll look at the funding that is requested after we subtracted out what we've recommended funding in round 5. So we do believe an adequate, appropriate geographic distribution of funds can be achieved. And you'll see in your packet that we provided the proposed grant round 5 summary table. So it shows the grant round 5 projects with the remaining funding needs. So subtracting out what we've already recommended in our previous package for round 5. And it shows that the remaining need is well over what the authority would need to provide to stay on track. 1.5 million to the East Bay and 0.6 million to the West Bay. And there's no remaining need in the South or North Bay as far as getting to 30% in the next year. So now let's look at opportunities to achieve equity. So all 16 projects would benefit economically disadvantaged communities, either by proximity to EDCs or through engagement with residents of these communities. 6 are located in or very close to an EDC. And those projects are shown in boldface on attachment 1, the table. Also, the Community Grants Program, which I'll be talking about in the next item, is only open to community-based organizations located in EDCs, and it operates on a rolling basis, so would not be affected by this change related to grant round 6. And when the budget for the coming fiscal year is proposed at your next meeting, staff will be recommending that the Community Grants Program total amount be increased from $400,000 to $600,000. And I would note that there's still $300,000 remaining of this year's allocation. So another issue is what other funding is available for folks to apply for. So several federal and state funders, as you heard earlier in the meeting, have higher than average amounts of funding available for San Francisco Bay restoration in the coming year. The Conservancy is expected to receive $350 million in this coming fiscal year, and then another $150 million after that for coastal resilience statewide. EPA's program, which you heard about, will have quite a lot of funding, $29 million this year. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act included funding for NOAA's coastal programs. It's anticipated there will be grant opportunities through NOAA in 2022. So staff would post information about these and other funding opportunities on the authority's website and provide that information in response to inquiries from potential applicants. As many of you know, applying for grants, particularly from public agencies, takes a considerable amount of work. This recommended approach for round 6 will enable project proponents to focus their attention on grant programs in 2022 that have larger amounts of available funding. That's if they didn't apply in round 5 for us. And project proponents can apply for authority funds again in 2023 when the available funding will be greater. So the resolution, staff recommends that the authority adopt resolution 97 describing the alternative process for grant round 6. The authority would forego issuing the RFP this year. Instead, we would request updated information from applicants, get input from the AC. We'd be able to bring you a list of projects earlier in the fiscal year, and we could use time saved to focus on additional outreach to improve equity, including greater engagement of residents of EDCs and more focus on the community grants program. However, if you did not pass this resolution, we'll be happy to bring a resolution authorizing release of an RFP for round 6 to the June meeting. Thank you. Any questions?
Perhaps it would be a good time to hear from Jessica Martini Lamb on the advisory committee discussion.
Thank you, Chair Pine and board members. During the advisory committee's March 18th meeting, we heard a staff presentation with a recommendation for going the RFP for grant round 6 and instead relying on applications submitted and either partially funded or not funded in grant round 5. The AC members had a really robust and insightful discussion about the recommendation. And as described in staff's memos, consensus was not reached on a motion to recommend approving the staff's recommendation. And due to the number of AC members recusing themselves from voting due to a conflict of interest, since many members had projects that could be benefit the organization in round 5, we lost our quorum and the AC was unable to take a formal position on the recommendation. However, I'd like to be sure to share some valuable input that was provided during the advisory committee's discussion to you all. I'd note that there was support for some AC members for the staff recommendations, particularly due to the fact that there were a large number of high scoring project applications in grant round 5. And there were also some concerns from AC members about the potential for closing the door to organizations that haven't yet submitted projects or applications for consideration, or to those smaller organizations that might have less access to funding and may be interested in applying for authority funding. There was also concern raised about public perception and the urgency of restoration needed in the Bay, and that not issuing an RFP might give an appearance that the authority has changed its pace or practice or is taking a pause. And then there was some interest from AC members in considering a hybrid approach that would require organizations that applied in grant round 5 to be reapplying to be considered for funding, but allow for new application to be submitted. I believe staff have addressed many of the issues that were discussed at the AC meeting in their memo today. And while the advisory committee didn't provide a formal recommendation on its proposal, I hope the input shared by AC members of assistance to staff and the board. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you for that feedback. I think it's one of these things that's definitely a judgment call. Reasonable people can disagree. I'm going to come back to the board for thoughts. Director Hahn.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I really appreciate the thoughtful way that this is being presented to us. As you said, Chair Pine, reasonable people could disagree, which really means that no matter what choice we make, there are some negative externalities that are unavoidable. But what we have here is, it's a proposal that I strongly support, in particular because of the focus on those externalities and how to address them. So looking at our equity goals, making sure that they are not compromised by taking this action, and really thoughtfully addressing the question of, how do we avoid having worthy projects not sort of be able to move forward for lack of funds by directing people to other funding sources, and noting for us to give us some comfort here that there will be additional money available through some of those other funding sources. And so I think I wasn't 100% sure when this was first discussed with us, but I feel very confident now, and I really appreciate the input also of the advisory committee and the work of staff to address the potential externalities. So thank you very much. And I'm very much in favor of this today.
All right, thank you, Director Hahn. Other comments? I would say I too favor the staff recommendation. We had such a strong group of applicants and such a inability to fund the requests in round 5, and so little money available in round 6. I think those factors combined to make this a a good proposal. Why don't we check with the public to see if any additional public comment? And we have Dr. Gorin would like to speak.
Just very briefly echoing your comments, thanking Jessica for the policy options deliberation, and really thanking the advisory committee. Even though you didn't have a quorum, we appreciate the complexity of the job at hand and the challenges that you would have in navigating through some of the grant applications and making recommendations. So thank you all involved, and I'll just say, yes, I will support the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, unless there's any further comments, Director Hahn would like to move the item.
Moved.
I'll second. And we can take the roll call vote.
Sure. Supervisor Joya? Oh, I think you would. Supervisor Peskin?
Aye.
Director Holman?
Yes.
Councilmember Hahn?
Yes.
Councilmember Leeper?
Aye.
Supervisor Gorin?
Aye.
Chair Pine?
Aye.
Okay, this motion passes. Agenda item number 13 is approved.
All right, so we have a path forward for the next round, which will be a little different than the past, but will all make sense. So our last item today is an update on the community grant program, which Jessica Davenport will provide.
Thank you very much for your last vote. And I am stepping in for Linda Tong, who needed to take off after her presentation of Tiscornia Marsh. But I want to thank her for prepping this PowerPoint, which I will share. Let's see. All right. So I will be giving you an update on the Community Grants Program now in its second year. The purpose of the Community Grants Program, as you'll recall, is to support projects that are led by community-based organizations in economically disadvantaged communities. It operates on a rolling basis. And the following types of projects are eligible: community visioning and engagement projects, training and education for community leaders to develop and implement small shoreline habitat projects, relationship building with restoration-focused organizations and agencies so communities can have a voice in the design and construction of large restoration projects on the shoreline, and actually funding small habitat projects themselves that have strong community benefits. So we have made some updates to the process over the last year, basically reducing the back and forth communication between applicants and reviewers. We've also held another series of networking sessions that happened last fall, 4 sessions, 1 in each region around the Bay, and they were on Zoom, but we did feel like it was important to connect people in their subregion of the Bay who might be able to partner with each other. And the goal was to facilitate new connections between these community-based organizations and the more restoration-focused agencies. There were over 50 participants representing those different types of organizations, community-based, environmental nonprofits, and public agencies. And we built on the lessons learned in the pilot year of 2020, where we also had networking sessions. And we got feedback that people would like to hear us present a little bit more about the authority and what it does at the beginning of the networking sessions, just to provide more context. And then also that the folks who had received funding from the authority, whether as a community grant or as a subcontractor on one of the larger grants, they presented their experience in applying and getting the money and doing the project. So that was really helpful, I think, for the other participants to hear, and they did request that we do more of these sessions in the future. So just to remind you of our funding to date, in the pilot year, last fiscal year, there were an authorization of $200,000 with a limit of $100,000 per project, and 3 eligible proposals were received, and the authority has now funded 2 of those. The third one is currently on hold, as I'll discuss in a moment. And then for the current fiscal year, you approve $400,000, still with a maximum of $100,000 each. And so far, we've received 2 eligible grant proposals, and you funded one of them in February. That was the Planting Justice project in East Oakland. And the second proposed project is currently in the application and review process, and we do expect at least 1 more application in the coming months. So for the coming fiscal year, we are proposing to raise the maximum grant award from $100,000 to $200,000 per project and allocate $600,000 total for the program when we bring you the budget at the next meeting. And we see value in supporting projects with larger dollar amounts that can potentially fund work over longer periods of time and engage more community members. Some of the proposals we've gotten to date were like only 1 year or less than a year. So it would be nice to have a longer term project. And also it just is a recognition of the substantial funding required for meaningful community engagement that may include paid internships and workforce development, and also the significant time and effort needed to develop projects that meet the authority's eligibility requirements. So let's do a quick rundown of the projects and how they're going. So first is the Marin City Urban Wetland Community Visioning Project. It aims to educate and empower Marin City youth and other residents to help shape the design of a small restoration project in their community. However, it has been difficult for the grantee to focus on habitat restoration when the community is faced with severe flooding issues, sediment contamination concerns, and a highly constrained site for restoration. We are keeping open lines of communication with the grantee and their partner, Audubon California, to support the community's needs in relationship to this project. Next is the Candlestick Point Stewardship Project. And this is an example of a project that showed the need for authority staff to coordinate closely with both the grantee and the landowner, California State Parks. State Parks was hesitant to support the project in the location initially proposed because of contamination issues. You'll see this is a theme coming out. And our collaboration resulted in choosing a project location that met everyone's needs, that was not contaminated. So next, the Bay Asian Pacific Islander Youth Connected to Environment. This is the one that's currently on hold, and it highlights the challenges of developing a project from application to staff recommendation. And so the applicant and the authority have not yet come to agreement on specific Measure A eligible project locations and activities. So that's on hold for the moment. Next is the project by Planting Justice, which, as you know, is just authorized in February. So I am excited to see where it goes. They are building on their existing programs with education and workforce developments, but expanding beyond the traditional nursery plant growing for commercial and residential use to growing and planting native plants to restore the shoreline habitat. Then there is the Oakland Shoreline Leadership Academy, which it was funded through the competitive grant round, but it does serve as a model for the type of project that can be funded by the community grant program. And the goal is to educate a cohort of Oakland residents about environmental and social issues along the Oakland shoreline and facilitate a visioning process for new shoreline restoration project ideas. And it's already leading to the development of proposals for small restoration projects that we hope can be funded by the authority. They haven't been submitted to us yet, but we're looking forward to that. And other project ideas that can be funded by other agencies. They don't quite fit our criteria, but they could maybe be funded by the Coastal Conservancy or others. So we have observed interest among community-based organizations in engaging in restoration work, particularly if the projects can also address their concerns about flooding and mobilization of contaminants in their communities, problems which are expected to increase with sea level rise. So to continue refining this program and better meet the needs of the community organizations, we propose the following improvements. We want to update the economically disadvantaged community maps based on the 2020 census data and clarify the eligibility locations. We want to clarify and streamline the application process where possible and provide adequate comments when the proposals come in to make sure they can refine them to be eligible for our requirements. And we wanted to conduct some targeted outreach to specific organizations that may benefit from this program and continue hosting the networking sessions. So in the coming years, staff will also, I have the next slide. We will also facilitate capacity building in the organizations that receive these grants. We'll invite grantees to participate in a cohort and share strategies. We'd like to provide some group training on goal setting, preparing a work program, preparing invoices, and communicating successes to a wider audience. We'd like to invite more AC members to help with training, give presentations, and be mentors to grantees. And we want to give a shout out to the San Francisco Estuary Institute, which has actually provided support to a couple of these grantees. And hopefully other AC members can do the same. And then also we look forward to recruiting grantees and other economically disadvantaged community representatives to serve on the advisory committee. So thank you. And just wanted to emphasize that we are looking forward to learning from and building deeper relationships with community-based organizations through this program. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Jessica, for the update. Really some good work being performed. You know, the recommendation is to increase the amount of money for the program and the size of the grants. Do you think there's enough pipeline to support that?
Oops, sorry. I do, because basically by increasing the funding, but also increasing the cap, we could potentially have 3 projects at a maximum of 200,000, whereas this year we budgeted for 4 projects at 100K each. So we would actually have fewer projects, but they would be able to get more money. And like I said, we're looking for them to be longer term because it's a lot of work to get them going and supported. And then after, we don't want 6 months, and then it's over and they have to start over with another application. So yeah, I think we do. And again, based on your passing the resolution to not have an RFP this year, we will have more time to do more outreach to communities. We have talked to some organizations that initially were interested, but they just didn't have capacity with COVID, dealing with food banks and other activities they were engaged in. And so maybe some of the ones that have been like a little too busy to apply to this program are ready to do that now.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments from board members? Director Lieber?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd just like to thank staff for their thought and action that's gone into this, and also the advisory committee as well. What's really moving to me about these community grants is giving regular people the opportunity to have a legacy around the Bay. And it's just very, very powerful. So I'm very happy to see these suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lieber. All right, why don't we check to see if there's any public comment?
There is no public comment, but
Director Gorin has raised her hand.
I'm always late to raise my hand, but I appreciate the conversation. I also think it is so important for us to contribute to the funding for grants and opportunities to really work on the training and the inspiration of our youth, especially our at-risk youth. We could not invest these funds more importantly and aspirationally for the future than what you're recommending. So, and I'm already thinking about, okay, we have Earthlings in Sonoma Valley. Let's see if we can get the Earthlings involved in something like this. So generating thoughts all the time. Thank you so much.
Similarly, I like the idea that this will also be a way to kind of recruit new advisory committee members. So add to the diversity of our advisory committee. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. So again, Jessica, thank you for the update. This is not an action item. And that brings us to the close of our meeting for the day. We meet again on June 24th. So thanks for joining us, everyone, and have a good weekend. Enjoy Earth Day.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.